Hello, everyone, and welcome back to RHAP's coverage of Jet Lag, the game. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, joined, of course, by Sasha. Sasha, how are you?
So good. I have the Imperial flag on. I'm ready. I'm ready to
Yes.
go.
You
And
don't
of
know
course-
what you're getting into.
Oh boy, we are joined
I watched Shogun.
by Adam, Ben, and Sam to talk through Jet Lag the Game, Season 12, Hide and Seek 2 in Japan. All of the names we can think of. Adam, Ben, Sam, how are you?
Hello.
That wasn't
Good.
an answer.
Well, no, I know. Hello is not an answer to how are you. That's fair. I'm doing well. I'm ready for a hard-hitting interview. There's been a lot.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of very hard-hitting questions people have had about this season that we haven't had a chance to respond to because we record the layover before we see audience response. So I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
Well, I watched the episode, the episode you did on the season, and look, you guys have got stuff to come at us with, so we're ready.
Oh, do they? Oh, I haven't.
No,
even
they
seen
do.
where They, did
They
that.
do. They
That's
spent the whole
funny.
time being like, "They're so stupid.
Oh, yeah,
They don't
the
know
whole
what
time.
they're
Whoa.
Well,
doing."
probably true.
That sounds
That's
like
fair.
them.
Look,
to me.
mistakes
Yeah.
were made,
Totally.
but
That's
No,
me, but I don't know Taran.
It is. It's actually. I think this is an interesting one because I do like. I was a little surprised when I went to your subreddit and the discussion about the episode, and I felt like there were a lot of people that felt very. First of all, they loved the season, but they were like very like you guys were getting a little cooked about the decisions in the final episode.
yeah, I noticed that.
and I was a little surprised, but I think that like, and we talked about this on our recap, but I think that it ultimately comes down to the fact that like, I mean, I think it's more a compliment than anything. I don't think it's like we're disappointed in the quality of the show. I think it's more so like you guys made this game that we like so much, and we were disappointed that we didn't get to see this cool thing that we wanted to see because we spotted this interaction that you guys, I guess, didn't. So like, you know, you're getting like cooked in the comments, but not in like a serious way. I think it was ultimately the thing. However, yes, we can have a hard-hitting interview where we talk about Sam. Why didn't you play?
Leave Sam alone.
Cards?
Honestly,
here's-
my first answer to that is I don't remember. That was so long ago. But yeah.
It is worth saying. I the way that I have felt through this whole season has been like the more that people are annoying about things, like in the comments and the Reddit and stuff, that's like just shows that they're engaging with this with the stuff. Like in our seasons
Sure.
where like people aren't as into the game or like the mechanics aren't clicking with people, they're all perfectly pleasant about it. They're all like, jet lag. But like when we have a game that's working, people are horrible to us. And that's how you know it's good.
And that's
Well,
Big
I think-
Brother. Sorry.
Yeah, and another thing that we've talked about on the number 2 Jet Lag podcast is that the way in which the audience, like the parts of strategy that the audience seems most engaged with, is not the same parts of the strategy that like we were most engaged with. We can go into that in more detail, but like writ large, it's like the audience is paying a ton of attention to cards, and to varying levels, we did not as much. I think maybe me to the least, but like I think we all agreed that like we were at least mentally much more wrapped up in the other parts of the strategy than the cards, whereas the audience is paying a whole lot of attention to the cards, which makes sense in retrospect. We can speak more to that, but that was
and
kind
I think
of
in fairness, and not to sort of just start the podcast only by defending ourselves, but like I think in retrospect, I think Ben especially shows Sam and I could have done better with the cards. Like I think that, you know, had we had another go, I think neither of us fully realized how important the cards ultimately were. And I think that if we had been more focused on them, we would have done a better job of utilizing them.
Can I?
Yeah, I think we have.
Yeah, as the non-strategy person on this podcast, as the vibes only human, this season felt way more like we were building a relationship with y'all, where it felt like, oh, we're getting to know you, and like spending extended amounts of time just like getting your like a thought process, getting like y'all being silly, right, in the water, whatever, it doesn't matter. It just felt very much relationship building in that way, parasocial, whatever you want to call it. And that felt more exciting to me, where I was like, oh, we just get to hang out while you play hide and seek.
Well, I think that's part of what we like about this format, is that there is like we intention. Well, these days, one of the kind of things that we look to do when we do game design is like, we want downtime. We don't want every moment to be go, 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 because the fun moments happen when you don't need to be moving quick and you have a little bit of time to, I don't know, go swim in a river or something.
Yeah, get interesting shots.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I think that to your point about the cards being what I think the audience focuses on. I mean, I think I'm assuming the thought process there is that the audience can sort of like see and understand the card strategy more than they can see and understand sort of the, not only like the psychology of like trying to, get ahead of one another, but also like the, we're not physically traveling on the trains. We're not like physically hiding in a spot for hours. And I have to imagine that those factors come into play as well. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically what it is. Yeah, I mean, I think that like, it's interesting and it makes sense that the audience basically never has feedback. I mean, sometimes they do, but much more rarely did they have intense critique of the choices of the seekers. Oh, you should have asked this question instead of this question, because the audience doesn't have full knowledge or like a full working knowledge of all, 60, 70 questions and what each question would mean to ask at any given point. So while I'm sure there are also mistakes that we made where like we should ask this question instead of this, you don't get flack. But because the audience has full context for the cards, it's easier for them to notice the mistakes that we make with them and
Which like, I think, as we keep saying, it makes total sense given like how we put these episodes together. But I am curious if Ben or Adam disagree with, well, if any of you actually disagree. But like, in my opinion, any round, it's won or lost by the seekers, not the hider. And the hider, the most impactful thing that the hider does to their success or failure is their selection of hiding location. And from there, the round is pretty much won or lost by the seekers. And there's incremental stuff, certainly, that the hider can do, but it's incremental. It's like we even say it's like bonuses. It's like time bonuses, and the curses are effectively intended to be an equivalent of that. So basically, say like the competitive side, I think, is much more in the seekers, but also, as Adam mentioned, it's like that's a lot harder for the audience to follow because that requires deep knowledge of train schedules and train lines and geography and stuff like that. So anyway, basically say like it's not like the audience is wrong for focusing on that. It's just like now we realize it's a little bit of a different perspective between us and the audience.
I do think that like we cause the problem for ourselves as producers, because like we need to create this narrative for the audience that like the hider's always still in it. The hider always has the chance to come back, and they could pull the right cards, and those cards could save them hours, and it could change the whole game. And like, again, it's like we need that for narrative purposes, because it's not very exciting to be like, well, they're fucked. But sometimes that is just the case, and like there's nothing that can be done.
And to build on that, it's like it's not that the curses can't do that. It's just that it's very rare that the curses will do that. Like if you look at the totality of the game and what happens on average, I think a round is won or lost by what the seekers do. But then I also want to add, on top of all this, as I mentioned earlier, we still totally could have played the cards a lot better. More so explaining.
Yeah. To be clear, we messed up on multiple occasions.
More so explaining why we were not as focused on cards as we should have been. Not to say like the cards are not worth focusing on. It's just like explaining our own bias. And also, I think one thing that we talked about amongst ourselves was like some of this is, I think, inertia coming off of season 1 of Hide and Seek, where the curses were really not very impactful at all. So this was a change that, and it's what we intended in design, but I don't think we internalized that right in the actual gameplay, or certainly me, and therefore didn't pay enough attention to the cards.
I think that, just to add one edit on what you said, Sam, I think that for the most part, the hider cannot have a massive effect on the time other than their hiding spot, but there are exceptions, and we saw some of them. Like the right use of the right curse or combination of curses at the right time can have a big impact. I think we saw that with Ben, like his great use of jammed door exactly when he used it had a huge impact. His use of veto had a huge impact. Like the right decisions at the exact right moments can have sort of a knockdown effect where the hider does have a big impact. It's just not super common.
Yeah, and it requires luck of those right circumstances arising. Luck of the circumstances arising, and then skill to identify the circumstance and play it then.
Yeah, and I think probably one of the reasons why I think some viewers probably felt like disappointed was that they were like, oh, this was one of those times, right, where like these combinations of curses could have made a difference, or at least it felt like that. But then it wasn't like noticed. And I think that was part of it. But I think also, in talking about like how, you're not often criticizing the choices of the seekers, something that I talked about in the recap was that I think another factor of that is that it might just be for me, but I think it's for most of the audience. You tend to root for the hider. Like you're always rooting for the hider. And that means that like you kind of want the seekers to mess up because that's more entertaining and more fun. And so if they do mess up, you're a lot less likely to be like, you're less likely to complain about it. You're gonna be like, oh man, what a mess up, haha. Should have checked Apple Maps, I guess, guys. Whoops, sorry. As opposed to like, oh no, why didn't you check Apple Maps? What's wrong with you? So I think that factors in as well, because you always want that moment of like searching for the slide and not being able to find it, and it's just like, I think that's part of it.
For what it's worth, regarding the finale, in my opinion, that was lost based on where I went. Because like it was, as I explained, both in the episode and in our podcast, like it was a intentional risk to go to Tokyo, to go to a major metro area, because we didn't know how that would play out. We had no one had done it, and this game incentivizes risk taking to get that superlative first place time. But looking back at it in retrospect, it turns out we did a good job as we intended to in game design, and I just don't think that hiding in cities was the right strategy. So it's like I don't really think that, barring some really good both combination of cards and bad luck / bad calls by Ben and Adam, I don't think that there was really any honest chance for that run to be a winning run. Again, in retrospect, not obviously not what I was thinking in advance, but in retrospect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree. I think it rewards risk taking. I think the idea to go to Tokyo was very fun, and I think that like for me, this is one of the things I talked about was that like. I personally, like, I wasn't paying enough attention to notice the combo of curses myself. Like, when I looked back, I remember thinking like, oh, where did the jam door curse go? Like, why didn't that one get played? But then like reading the comments, like, why didn't he combine that one with the I forget the name of the
right? Because that's what I saw a ton of stuff about, which I hadn't thought about either. Was that you had done Curse of Urban Explorer on us, which meant we always had to leave the train station to ask questions. And you had jammed door, And if you had played that, then it would have meant that because we have to leave the train station to ask a question every time, we would have always had to roll to get back in the station and to get on the train. But you didn't play Jammed Door. You discarded it as part of a discard 2, draw 3 to try to optimize your time bonus. And I think the truth is, this was at your second location. And I think that the answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, was just you just didn't realize that.
Probably, I honestly don't remember the circumstance because it wasn't like a casting cost thing, right? What was the casting cost?
The casting cost was to discard 1 card. So you drew it originally and you thought about casting it, but then you didn't have a card to discard. But then you seem to have just sort of not worried that much about it. And then you later discarded it in order to just try to optimize your time bonuses.
I think also you had played Urban Explorer prior to the move, if I'm not mistaken. So
that was the one.
It's possible that you might not have like remembered that they were still doing that as well at the time.
That honestly probably was it. I think by that time in the game day, there were so many cards that had gone through that I probably was not remembering what active curses were. I honestly don't remember that well, but sure sounds to me like it was just misplay.
We were tired.
We were really tired.
This is the longest game you've done, right?
Yeah.
And what I will say, to be perfectly honest, I don't remember exactly when this happened, but at a certain point, it was clear to me based on the questions asked and the place where Ben and Adam were that the writing was sort of on the wall, and that we were that I was not winning the game in any reasonable implementation of it. So there was a certain point at which it was, to be perfectly honest, I was sort of strategically done.
Yeah, I think that's the most fair answer. Like, we can analyze everything else, but
also like just to be clear, like Sam doesn't need to defend his choices in the game. Like you know, you're just playing a game. You're doing your best. Sometimes you make mistakes. But I think as we've mentioned, like as viewers, you want to see certain things, and so you're disappointed when you don't. And I think that can sometimes lead to feeling like you want, like, why didn't you do this? Like why didn't we get to see this? And I would assume, honestly, I think you guys have pretty good fans overall. I think that probably most of them are, you know, even if they're just expressing disappointment in comments occasionally, I don't think they are like hungry for your blood. Like, how dare you?
Well, I think
maybe you feel differently.
What I remind myself is, like, you look at any traditional sport, because of course we are a sport, but maybe not a traditional one. And there's only so many ways you can engage with a sport. And the predominant one is analyzing and critiquing the decisions made by the people doing it. Like that's kind of the thing. So I certainly, I would expect that the vast majority is in good faith, and it's just like the fun way to engage with things. And hopefully no one's out for blood because we, I don't know, played the wrong card or something.
Yeah. Let's fight. I'll fight him. I love engaging online like this. I also, speaking of all of this, is there a way, maybe in game design or editing, that you feel, you know, is the ideal way of consuming? Because I didn't think about how it's really the seekers, right? That we should be like honing in on or spotlighting. In my mind, when I'm consuming it, I'm very much seeing it as the hider. But when you're editing or whatever in game design, like, is there a certain way you'd like, you know, for us to watch this?
I think one of the tough things about the show is that, and I think we've said this before on this podcast, but like, we are trying to sate different audiences that want different things. And I think, like, you know, Sasha, I think like you are into the kind of experiential travel part of the show, and like, you know, getting to see the places and our reactions to the places that we are. And like, for you, the hider role does.
How dare you?
Is like, you know, you get to see a person enjoy a thing. and then, but there's also a very different audience that is really into like the gameplay and analyzing the map and blah 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 blah, and they might, relate with the seeker role more. But yeah, I don't know. It's tough.
And I think one thing that we've like, I think it is a difficulty of this game in particular, hide and seek, in that the audience experience, as we were saying, is not it's not exactly one-to-one representative of what we believe kind of the true strategic, I don't know, the strategic layer of this game. It's not like a one-to-one representation of that. You certainly see everything, but as we're saying, it's a little bit disproportionate. And that kind of is linked to the fact that it's really hard to convey through video succinctly the ways in which the geography and train schedules and stuff like that impacts strategy, because when we play it, it's quite a lot. And this game, I think part of what makes this game so fun is that we're able to convey a good bit of that, visually through the seeker experience and the maps and stuff, and I think that's a lot of what people seem to enjoy with this game, and that certainly does a lot of it. But then the next part that is just always hard to convey is train schedules, train availability, geography, how long trains take, because different trains go at wildly different speeds. And in games like, particularly like Tag, for example, we've had a lot of moments where we try to synthesize like the interesting strategic scenarios that are unfolding due to train schedules and stuff like that. But like, it takes a lot of VO and a lot of motion graphics to explain like one of those scenarios, and they're happening all the time. So there's like all these ways in which schedules are impacting our strategy, schedules, geography, etc., the entire public transit experience, basically. And we can only convey a small portion of those. And it's quite tricky even to convey a small portion of those. So basically, yeah, and the long way of saying like, it's really, really hard for the audience to engage with that layer well.
Yeah, and I've been to Japan and taken many wrong trains, and it's still, I don't think, it's still hard to understand.
Yeah, I think something that you guys did during this season was on the airport episode. You were like, listen, there's no way we can hide where Sam is here.
Yeah.
We're just gonna let you know, here's where he is. And for me, that was actually, I think, my favorite episode of the season.
Same,
I don't think it was specifically because I knew where Sam was, but I did find that I was really enjoying knowing where he was, because it made the seeking portion a little more tangible for somebody like me who was not able to normally be able to like figure it out on my own. And it made me think about some of the other things that maybe we see or don't see, like the hider choosing where to go, like that thought process. What are the different locations they considered, and then why did they end up here? I think is something that I'm sometimes interested in thinking about. And I was curious to know, like, are those things, like having done the airport episode, how do you feel about being more open with hiding locations in the future and maybe incorporating other areas of the game into the edit?
I think that it's honestly probably something we could play with more. I mean, I remember when we first came up with this idea for Switzerland, we weren't 100% sure if we were going to show where the hider was or not. And then we ultimately just felt that, it would lead to more drama. There's more opportunity for things to be a little more open-ended if you don't know where they are. Like, I think that like you get to feel a little more like you're in the same boat as the seekers, right? But But I do think this maybe is interesting is that, again, because especially in Switzerland, the vast majority of the gameplay was on the seeker's side, we wanted to more put you in the seeker's shoes. And I think that sort of as we've discussed here, especially with the new card system, now you're a little more in the hider's shoes, certainly, than you were in Switzerland. Like, you're certainly experiencing more of their perspective. And so when you know where the hider is, you're in hider mode. You're in fully in hider perspective. I think the truth is that, like, there maybe is more room to experiment with it. Like, I was happy with when we did it there. And for example, like in Switzerland, when we split Ben's run into two, we reveal where he is at the end of that one episode. I think like we reveal where he is before we find him. We do that thing where we find Merla, Shaken, and Magid, and we show the sign and we show where Ben is. So it's an interesting thought. I think that there is probably a little more room for experimentation. I think our default tends to be that if we've established a norm, we are relatively hesitant to break it. And the norm we established was you don't know where the hider is. And so we, I think, just default to that norm.
Well, and the flip side of that to me, just to interject quickly, is the finale, where I believe accidentally you had to sort of do this, or you chose to do this in a way because you didn't have the footage that you needed from Sam to not show where his hiding place was for a while,
right.
Which fully put us in with the Seekers, which I also thought was really interesting, because now all of a sudden I was like second guessing, like, wait, did they really match the building? Like, are they really in the right place?
Right.
Is he really here? Where could he be? And so that was also very fun to me. So yeah, I think yeah, there's all kinds of different ways to play around with it, but it's such a fun format, I think, either way.
Yeah, I mean, that exact kind of thing that you're talking about, Taran, is like that is like ultimately the thing we need to play with, which is like we need to raise questions for the audience that they want answered by the end of an episode, and then get the satisfaction of answering that question. But like having unanswered questions is like inherently uncomfortable and like puts you on edge. And so like there's obviously a balance of like we want people's interest to be piqued without being like, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
And that is a tricky balance to strike.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that the lack of consistency of when to reveal the location could be quite interesting, and because I think like the cases in which we have revealed it early in the past, I think they've led to interesting moments, interesting variety, etc., which is quite nice. Because I guess another thing related to this, sort of more relevant to our previous conversation, is that one thing that I found this season that one could that revealing the locations earlier would benefit, is that like there was a wide spectrum, I think, from round to round in how much opportunity we had in hiding locations, both like pretty directly in terms of just like how many different locations could we get to in our time based on where we were, but also how many tricky locations could we get to, because like ultimately what sort of did it was tricky locations, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, but both Adam and Ben's best runs were I think in large part their best runs because there was some little trick that made them difficult, and it's hard in the edit to necessarily convey that well, the latitude in hiding location goodness without obviously discussing the hiding locations more.
I mean, I think that it's worth mentioning too, like, there are times in episodes where I think, and maybe this isn't always the case, but I think that like tension can really be lost if you know where the hider is, because like, for example, and I think the truth is that this happened more in Switzerland than it did in this season in Japan, but like, especially if you consider like my last run, like
Mm.
there are times when Ben and Sam really think that they might
Mhm.
have figured out where I am. And the truth is that they are actually pretty far from me. But if you know that they're pretty far from me, like I think that the finale of Switzerland would have frankly not been a very good episode. Like it would have lost a lot of its tension and drama and interest, because you just would have known that they were in a totally different area of the map than I was. And so it was important for you to be in their shoes, because in their mind, the game was quite close up until the end, potentially, because they didn't know where I was. Whereas if you knew where I was, I knew that I had won, frankly, a while before I formally won. So like, again, like the way that you withhold information, you know, we always want to be, again, I mean, Ben worded it really well. You want to be doling out information in a way that's going to create the best viewing experience. And I think that, but I do think it's true that like it varies. Like sometimes it is better to know.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the end of episode 4, I think Ben's part 1 of his second run, the ending of that episode being Ben kind of like that, like they went the wrong way.
Right.
Like
Because you get hints.
it's
That's
harder
the other
to
thing. The
yeah.
fighter's always giving hints.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is that, you know, because I agree. I feel like it is a balance, and I think that you have benefits on one side and you have benefits on the other side, and it just depends on the situation. Because sometimes I feel like I'm just waiting for like Adam, like, is this a good thing or a bad thing, Adam? Please tell me. And you're like, well, this could be a good thing, and I'm like, okay, I think it could be a good thing. Whereas like if I know they're at the airport and they're like, could he be at the airport? I'm like, oh my god, are they going to figure it out? But at the same time, you then also have those moments in the episode, like in Switzerland, your run, Adam, or the one I just mentioned with Ben, where it's like, do they have it, Ben? And Ben's like, they don't have it. And you're like, oh. So yeah, I think definitely like there could be some benefit to variety there, just depending on the situation. But I think that's one of the fun things about the format is the ways that you can play with what the audience knows and doesn't know. And again, I think that like it really lends itself toward the audience being really invested in the outcome, which is why, like for me, Adam, your first run, you get caught via Google Maps, and then you don't have time to go to the hiding spot you wanted to go to. And I was like, oh damn, like that sucks. I really wanted to see what would have happened if he had gotten to that hiding spot. And then it got even more disappointing, but also funny, when it happened to Sam the next episode. Like he has this amazing hiding spot and then accidentally gets found, and you're like, oh man, it would have been so funny to watch Adam and Ben run around an airport for 2 hours trying to find this place.
I think it would be like 5, but
it was very funny to see it play out that way. So it's like, I think that, yeah, like you really find yourself being so invested in outcomes, because it can be so funny to watch certain things play out.
Even the ghillie suit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fact that you don't always get what you want to watch as a viewer
is
what makes it good when you do get what you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it is true that every once in a while, when something doesn't go well, I like it because it proves that the show is not scripted. Like like, I don't know, like I think so, like, well, one thing I thought was really funny, again, I my goal is not to just get on here and defend ourselves, but one thing I thought was very funny was all the people being like, the finale is so scripted. This is the most scripted thing ever. I'm like, if it was scripted, don't you think we would have done a better job of the scripting of it?
Yeah.
Like,
I think we all kind of
talking
agree
about?
that
Like,
it's probably the weakest episode of the show.
that was crazy to me. They're like, it's so scripted. That's why Sam is like not playing well. It's like, if we were scripting it, you would have Sam win in the finale. Like, what do you mean?
Well, that was like another thing.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it was thinking about, like, I think part of the reason why people are let down by the finale is that we've unintentionally built this reputation. We've been very lucky with very competitive finales in the past,
Yep.
especially for our more similar shows. So like I think an audience kind of builds that subconscious expectation, and in an unscripted show, that's not always what happens.
Yeah.
Well, thank God we had the move card happen. I
Oh, yeah.
remember I was so mad. I was so mad, man, when it happened.
You
Like-
bent
That's-
over like
That's the
that.
thi-
was
yeah, that's the thing
truly-
too, is that like for as much as maybe you might consider the finale to be the worst episode of the season, like I don't even know if I agree, because I think even just the moment of Adam and Ben walking through a train station, Adam going ahead and Ben just stops in his tracks, and I was like, what's going on? And he just can't even speak. And he's and because this is Ben, who's like not usually like the most competitive person.
Right.
But then he's just like, no, this can't be happening. It was so good. That was such a good moment.
No, in the end, it
Well, I
was
haven't
very,
rem-
very good that happened. Thank God that happened.
Yeah. I think they had a lot of blisters clouding their thinking at that moment.
Yeah, I wanted to be done.
Well, I also think that from Ben's perspective, it was like Ben, in his mind, I think had won, frankly, like at the point at which we did the 50-mile radar from Shinjuku. Like,
Mhm.
I think by about then, it was like, because the thing was, Ben was going to win unless there was a huge mess up. And so, like, at the point at which we had gone the right way, we knew Sam was within 50 miles of Tokyo. Like, Ben was, we were, playing and we had to find him. But I think Ben was sort of like, by the time the move card is revealed, Ben, I think in his head, is the winner of Jet Lag season 13 for it's been about 2.5 hours since you've won in your mind.
Yeah.
Like,
And well, you can watch the
completely
episode.
over.
You see the way that we're acting. Like, we're just
We stop
really,
and eat sushi.
yeah,
like,
we're just like,
Yeah.
and then it's
Yeah.
just complete tonal shift.
And like I'd say, also like to be clear, this game is normally fun to play, and I think I especially had a lot of fun for somewhere between 4 and 5 days.
Mhm.
But then it was very hot. Ben and Adam had a lot of blisters and stuff like that, and I'm not sure that day 6 of Japan, just going through Tokyo, was, let's say, the most fun day of filming we've ever had. So I can understand how the thought of going, oh, I'm within an hour of being done with this entire season, and I can relax finally, and being like, oh no, this could go on for many. I understand how I would feel in that situation. I have sympathy for that.
See, this is, again, it's just like the more miserable you guys are, the more fun we're having as an audience.
Unfortunately.
Exactly. Thank God.
We just want to see Ben be really disappointed.
Yeah.
We want the seekers to screw up and have to search around for hours.
Cursing Sam's life every time.
Here's what we should do. I think we should do a one-off jet lag special where we return to Narita Airport and play it out as if they've never found me, because that would get you that content you want.
Yes.
Do you know that I had two of the cards where you make someone go to a random whatever those
you
are called.
duplicated it.
You
I played one, and oh my God, it would have been, I'm still salty about that.
Mhm.
I think we all are. That's why we're stressed.
So another thing that I feel like I noticed throughout this game is that there are a couple cards that have become staples. Tallest building from the train station, Strava map. I guess the question is, how do you feel about that? Is that something that you intended, or that you're happy with, or is that something where you're like, oh, I wish we would find a way to provide a little more variety to some of those like staple questions?
So I think we actually have worked on that a little bit. So we did feel like tallest building ended up being a little overpowered. So we actually adjusted the parameters for it for the home game, which is that now you get to choose which entrance to the station you are looking from when you take a photo of the tallest building. So you have optionality over what you do. And then Strava map, yeah, I mean, we made it so that you can only use Strava map in the large version of the home game. Like it's not an option in the medium or small. I mean, we haven't even talked about this. I've been thinking about it, and I think that we should consider nerfing Strava map though. And I think the way to nerf it would be.
You just say that because that's how I always find you.
I know, but I think it is a little OP. I think that the way to nerf Strava map is to say it doesn't have to be north-south oriented.
I think that I'm just too good at Strava map.
I will say the thing about Strava map that I don't think people realize when they watch, and it's been interesting because the people who have played the home game have noted this, like when they've reported back after trying it, is a lot of them have been like, Strava map isn't as OP as you think because it takes so long to figure out where it is. Like it does have the potential to nail somebody, but the amount of time you spend and potentially waste just searching makes it a lot more mixed than it is. But we already nerfed tallest building. I am moderately in favor of nerfing Strava.
Well,
that's my take.
In my opinion, the most fun the most fun ones to use are ones like Strava maps and photos, because those are the ones that you can those are the ones where the process of analyzing them goes from like you have an intuition and then you find ways to confirm your intuition, and it takes time, it takes effort to confirm your intuition. And I think it's so fun and so satisfying as a player to create a theory and then confirm that theory. And like the way you do Strava map searching, you don't just simply like, oh, here's a town, is this the town? Nope. Here's another town, is this the town? Nope. Like that is just wildly inefficient. The way to do it is to start to like analyze like what are the broad shapes of streets in this area? Where do I think there could be a street structure roughly like this?
Or is there a castle in the place and Adam's hiding?
Yep.
Yes, that also helps too. So like in my opinion, it's a lot of fun. So I understand how that doesn't always translate to the best viewing experience, because from the viewing experience, it's like, okay, we're searching. I'm like, oh, I've got it. You don't necessarily see the same progression, but certainly for the home game, I think they're a lot of fun. And then one other thought that this relates to is that I sometimes see an audience belief among a certain audience that like all of the questions or all of the curses or all of the cards or challenges or these things that we write, some people seem to believe that they should be perfectly balanced in that like when you balance the cost versus the reward, everything should kind of balance out to the same expected value. And there are some games where I think that is right, but I don't think that in many games that is actually the best game design, because I think the lack of consistency and the ability to find the ways to increase your expected value, like that is good gameplay, that's strategy. So I think it's interesting for there to be a variety of expected values across curses, challenges, questions, whatever. So personally, I'm a little bit, I believe, and this is just my belief, that I'm not super concerned about certain cards being OP as long as it doesn't in the long run lead to some sort of rote strategy where it's just like, this is the best way to play every single round. But I think what we've seen historically is that even with these powerful cards, it's so circumstantial when they're powerful. They might often be powerful, but I don't think there's really any card where it's like, this is always overpowered or this is always the best card to pull. I mean, the one circumstance where we did have this was in Switzerland, where we had a it was like the choose five. The rhymes. What was it exactly? It was the name, the letter.
5 words. Five words.
Oh, yeah.
You choose 5 words. One of them has to rhyme with the name of your town.
Like that's a card where it's not like it always makes sense to ask that as just like the first thing, and that's not interesting for there just to be like an always consistent best opening move. So that's why we eliminated that. But right now, I'm not sure we have a card or question. I keep saying card question that is equivalent to that. I don't think.
Yeah, and I think also like one way that it can start to self-balance is that if you are finding that like, oh, every single time we're asking tallest building, you then have to start to account for like, okay, then I'm just going to make sure that the place I go to
Exactly.
doesn't have a good tallest building. Or
And
the other thing that I was thinking about during the season was like, I'm going to plan my shot like for the tallest. I'm either going to take it ahead of time or I'm going to plan ahead of time exactly what I want to do to make it as, you know, least informative.
And I said this on our podcast, I think, but like exactly with this thought, it's like for my last round, before I even selected where I went, I made sure that there was a combination of 5 turns that would lead to a perfect grid pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew at any moment, I knew exactly where I was going to run to for my Strava question because for the exact, it was like down, that, and just like perfect 90-degree turns, not even with perfectly square blocks, so that it's like quite literally the least helpful data point, just 90-degree turns and square, not even a rectangle. You don't even get to match a rectangle. It's just a square.
But yeah, and we saw Adam, you know, when you were hiding the nearest street, you were trying to be like, well, all of these streets are in a similar orientation.
Big time.
But then you got caught with the trees behind you, which was unfortunate.
Right. The trees were tough. Well, this was also something that was interesting to me, which was that like a lot of people were like, he's just hiding on a bench. That's so crazy. And it was like, well, that's not really what the hiding spot is about. Like, especially because you have to be within 10 feet of a street. Like, you're never going to have a hiding spot where like have we ever had that happen where the seekers were on the same block as the hider and didn't just find them? Like,
well, maybe it could have if Ben didn't have a
Merle
light.
was shocking a little bit, but that wasn't because Ben was like under the slide. It was because Ben was in a no. But the thing was, he was on a street that we never went on. We never walked down that street and didn't see the slide, right? Like the problem is we couldn't find the street.
I think
I mean, you're right in that, like, when you're within 10 feet, we've never.
It's just kind of Jover. So the thing is like, what I'm optimizing for is what is the street that will take them the longest time to get to, not what is a street that has a spot where once they're on the street, they won't see me. Because again, that's never happened. It's never happened that they're on your street.
I will say, I think best episode of hide and seek is when one of you gets to film the other two walking by and not notice.
I do think like it would like, I want, you know, in future seasons, if we play hide and seek again, I hope that happens, you know, at least once. I don't think it would, like, I think it would be funny once. I think multiple times it, like, I do think it would take something away from the game a little bit, just because it's like, if all the game is built around these mechanics of narrowing down the map and asking the right questions and playing the right cards, if it all just comes down to, well, you were stuck in a bush and they couldn't physically see you with their eyes, like, it would feel a little silly.
This actually reminds me, I saw a lot of critique about Ben and his ghillie suit. I mean, similar thing as you were saying, it's like audience expectation, you're expecting something being the ghillie suit. I was like, oh, Ben, why did you not cover your green light? Blah, 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 blah. So I could see him with my naked eye too. Just to be clear. When I said that, it was
was mostly a joke. And like, I knew when they were walking down, like, I was like, they can see me. Like, because it looks really dark on camera.
Yeah, it looks dark.
Wearing the red jumpsuit too under the.
Well, like, we had matched the street exactly too. So it's like, you know.
Well, this is the other thing is that, I mean, and this is something that, you know, because I agree with you, Taran. Like, it would be so fun if someone was in the bush and you film walking past and they don't see you. Like, that'd be so fun. But like, the truth is, the photo of you will always reveal where you are. So like, if I'm the photo of you, or the photo straight up, or the photo of the tallest thing that you can see, all of which I think are important questions to have in the game. If I'm on the street where you are, and I've been sent a photo of you, I can always figure out where you are. Or if I have a photo of the tallest thing you can see, I can figure out what angle you took that from and figure out where you are. Or the photo straight up, I can figure out exactly where you are. So like, I just think that like, if we wanted to make it so that you're literal, like not just the street you're on, but like the spot on the street, like the bush you're in is a huge part of the strategy. We'd have to eliminate all of those questions, which like I don't think would work for sort of other reasons. But
yeah, I mean, like, would you disagree that like if I get a picture of somebody in a bush, now when I walk down the street, I have to check all the bushes if I want to clear that street, as opposed to like quickly scanning the benches. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean that's probably true. I mean,
Which
it
is
would have
like
been
a minor
interesting.
optimization, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that you can do the matching of the street that they're hiding on with Strava in part precludes that, because we sort of figured that, but we sort of figured that out later on. I think that if you didn't have that question, then potentially it would be more powerful if there was a good bush. I mean, the truth is that like I would have loved to have hidden a bush. There weren't any bushes in the neighborhood where I was.
I'm also just picturing like a selfie from somebody who's like just in a bush, and you're just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Now I have to check all the
I
bushes.
I think there's a not zero chance that if I had gotten to hide in the woods that I wanted to hide in, which had like dense bamboo directly off the path, that we could have seen something like this happen.
Yeah.
You keep saying, but it's like we clocked that exact spot as we were walking.
No. I know that you had clocked that I might be in those woods, but like I don't think that would have made the difference. But I'm saying I think that it would have been a little difficult for you to figure out which part of that woods I was in, because it was very dense bamboo and I could have been 10 feet out while still being pretty hard to see in that bamboo.
It's true that bamboo is really dense. So
bamboo is very dense. So
yeah, that would have been tricky, but it would have been tricky for sure.
Yeah. Ben, did you ever see any monkeys?
Only heard them. Saw quite a few creatures in my travels, but never got to see the monkeys. And the thing is, those monkeys, I didn't think they were supposed to be scary, because those are the same monkeys that like go in the bathe in the hot springs. And they're like really small, but there were all these signs that were like, watch out.
It felt like you guys struggled a lot with wildlife this season, between the monkeys and the birds and the failure to find snakes.
It was a tough one.
I just gotta say, like, go ahead.
I just want to say, I saw a snake in Izukogen, and it was before I pulled that card. So I knew there were snakes. I did see a snake. And I saw a crab, but that card didn't include crustaceans, so a crab would have done nothing.
You can see Ben's crab in the Nebula exclusive off takes.
That's true. In the outtakes, you can see it
coming out soon.
Yeah, that bird situation was tough. I mean, Ben, noted spotter of birds, can attest. Like, there were no damn birds in that place. Like,
yeah, it was weird.
It was a crazy situation. I literally think I spent an hour and a half trying to like find a good place to find birds, and there were none. Like, the fact that I even found a bird to film for even 24 seconds at the time that I was trying to do it was sort of a miracle.
Well, I'm pretty sure you actually found your bird in the exact same spot where we found our bird.
I did. It was the only place.
Like, that's the bird spot.
No,
yeah, like even though you only got 24 seconds, I thought like, oh, this might be like a killer thing for him still, because they waited until they got to his spot to do it, and it took him like hours to find a bird, but then they found him really quick.
I mean, of course, we didn't know this. I was worried about that challenge, but we were, I mean, at every train station prior to Izukogen, right?
No,
Saruhashi. I was forgetting all the names, but but anyway, we had checked at every spot and like we did not see a single bird. But our logic was like, oh well, if he found one, we'll find one. which worked out in the end, but I guess maybe it was riskier than we thought.
It was also confusing because all of the stations, all the train stations in Japan make bird sounds, fake bird
Yes.
sounds. Because what did we learn? It was like to help blind people.
It was to
navigate.
guide visually impaired people to the stairs, I believe.
Yeah,
Oh wow, that's interesting. Why?
But it's also very pleasant.
it is.
Because it's pleasant. Maybe I don't know.
I think because you don't even really notice it if you're not paying attention, if you're not like trying to find them. Although, what happens
Cool.
if there's a bird like on the tracks?
R.I.P. to
True.
that bird.
R.I.P. to that visually impaired person.
Yeah.
I doubt they can hear that crazy. Oh my gosh.
You know that when you lose a sense, it elevates your other senses.
I mean, listen, speaking of, because Adam also lost his glasses, but I like low-key am blind. But
I found them later.
wait,
It
really?
turned out I didn't lose them. Yeah, it turned out they were just like somewhere. I don't remember where they were, but they were. I did have them somewhere.
Still
'Cause I
relatable.
found them later in my bag, which was awesome.
Honestly, be relatable. I love
They're
that.
right here.
I
Same ones.
period. I also was wondering, would you want to or look into expansion packs, like where it's like countrywide or country specific expansion packs? Because what I talked about when we were recapping was I miss like Japan specific things, like a claw machine, curse killer. If you had to, find like get a specific toy or a specific amount of toys and difficulty levels or a 7-Eleven snack. But have you all like thought about stuff like this?
But
No, definitely.
yeah, so before Ben or Adam say anything, I will say, because we never like to use committal language on anything, because then the audience thinks that something will 100%
I mean, I
happen.
heard maybe. I heard maybe for
Allegedly.
sure.
Well, that's not committal language, so good job, Ben. This is a thing that we have considered. Does that seem like a fair statement, Ben or Adam?
Yeah, well,
I would say
I think we can say that like we wanted to do a home game for a very long time, and we waited like finally once we figured out hide and seek and we realized, oh, this could be played anywhere and we could make this universal game. How great! But one thing we were considering before we had hide and seek was like, well, maybe what we would do is we would make games that were location specific that you could buy if you lived in that place, like a New York City game or a London game or a Paris game. And so certainly putting, because obviously, I mean, as you guys noted, like one of the weaker points of this game was just that it didn't have the Japan specific stuff, and that like not only could you have fun Japanese things that you were doing, but also like you could balance it more specifically for Japan. And I could see an argument for doing that all over.
Well, I'm submitting my payment for that.
Oh, we get it now?
It's great.
I already bought the game, so.
Hey.
Well, you didn't buy the expansion pack.
Well, where is it? Give me exclusive access. I'll
Give me a
it.
down payment, and maybe I'll consider it more.
Fine.
No guarantees.
LMK.
But,
Yeah, I think we try to avoid like definitive
language.
Yeah.
But yes, what I will say that is not a direct answer is that like we intend for hide and seek, the home game, to be something that we have around for a while, and as part of that, we certainly imagine that there will be that the current iteration will not be the permanent iteration. Will not stay that way forever, basically.
Yeah, listen, and then maybe we can nicely bully our RHAP podcasters to play it when we go for live shows.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
This is something that we considered, is that we do live shows, and then we were like, what if we did a hide and seek game? But then we were concerned, and maybe you can alleviate these concerns, or maybe you can confirm them, that we are not smart enough to play hide and seek.
No.
Look, I
don't
think
that's
that
true.
I would love for a wide spectrum of people to make their own video versions of Jet Lag Hide and Seek, so I can flip the script and start to critique what
Not
they do.
this. Not this.
Well, see,
We never-
so my concern
more than
especially
willing.
is. Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
more than willing to come back and host RHAP for an episode and drill into every little decision you make on your version of hide and seek.
I never dissed, so I don't know what you're talking about.
My strongly held opinion is that the hide and seek game is designed to be playable by a normal person who doesn't do this as their job.
Yes.
So my concern is what happens if you are seeking and you ask a question of the hider, and the hider accidentally answers the question wrong.
It happens. It does happen.
I think it's circumstantial. I mean,
it's a case by case basis thing.
Yeah.
I think that because that's happened in simulations when we were creating the game. And so like, I think that typically what you would do is like, you figure it out usually pretty quickly, actually, because I think that what can happen is like they answer the question wrong and then you ask another question and then those two things don't fit together and you're like, wait a minute, just to clarify, like, this is all right? Like
yeah, I
check?
mean, when we are actually filming the season, like I can definitely say that like Adam and I, when we were having a lot of trouble with Ben, we probably texted him like 3 times being like,
yeah, I was so worried. I was so worried
really
that I
sure?
Yeah, we were like, you're sure?
I was just going back through and like
15
checking
miles
each one. I was like, nope.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
But like I think like this game clearly requires a lot of trust between the players that they're doing good faith efforts, because like it's a game that like there's totally infinite ways of cheating if you're trying to cheat. So like you got to just trust that everyone's playing it for fun and all that. So I think usually you can kind of just be like, okay, maybe let's just agree, okay, this probably cost you 30 minutes in time, let's just deduct that from the end. I think it's something where between players you can kind of figure out the most appropriate fix for any mistakes.
But I would also say, for what it's worth, there's two other parts to this answer. One is, in general, the questions that are being asked of the hider are quite easy to figure out what the answer is. Like, are you within 15 miles of this location? It's like, it's pretty easy to figure out if you are or if you aren't. Like, are you in this prefecture? It's like, well, it's pretty, like, especially because like your most important job as the hider is to correctly answer questions. And so like most of the questions are pretty easy to figure out. And then the other thing, which is worth mentioning, is that like, and we clarify this in the hide and seek rule book, like if there's a question where like it might be difficult to determine the answer, or like, typically it is the job of the seekers to clarify the options for the hider. So like, for example, in a tentacle situation, when it's like, let's identify all the zoos within 15 miles, it's the job of the seekers to say, these are the zoos that we've identified that count. And so which of these are you closest to, right? So like, it's their role to make it easy for the hider to answer it. And so that way everyone's working off the same set of information.
Cool.
And then we break it because we can never figure it out. I'm just kidding.
Is there anything else from the season that you feel like you learned that you might be implementing in future seasons? Like, I'm always interested in sort of what you take away from each season.
We learned a lot. Well, go ahead, Sam. You seemed like you had something.
Not anything that insightful. I mean, to me, I think this season was actually felt like we had applied a lot of what we learned in prior seasons, and it paid off well. So I think that sort of solidifies some of our beliefs of what is kind of the best recipe for an entertaining season. But I assume you're asking more from the production perspective, not the gameplay perspective, because I think we've gone through that side.
We've gone through a lot of what we learned that we could play this game better as players.
But I think the reason why hide and seek ends up being so popular, and particularly this implementation in Japan is so popular, is honestly just balance of all of the different things that make the audience appreciate and enjoy one of our jet lag seasons. We had some great locations, great scenery, interesting experiences. We had the time to experience them. We had moments where it was more like travelogue-y. We had good strategy. We had good ways that the audience could engage with that strategy, highly visual kind of understanding of that strategy. Lots of runtime, variety of different strategies episode to episode. Like, these are all things that we know are parts of what leads to an audience member, or at least especially an average audience member, enjoying a season. And there's a lot of prior seasons I feel like optimize really strongly for some of these factors at the expense of other factors. And through time, I think we've tried to balance out, like, okay, this season is like really good just for like travelogue-y feelings, but weak on strategy. So we do another one that's like really strong on strategy, but weaker on but whereas this, I feel like it really just strong on everything, in my view.
Yeah, especially teddy bears.
Yeah,
definitely strong on teddy bears.
I think, in terms of lessons learned, because I think that there are some, like, I can give a few boring answers, like production wise. Like, I think we learned that, like, it can be useful for each, like, from a view perspective, for each episode to be a little more standalone. Like, and then we also learned that, like, the audience, in the one time that we broke up an episode, like, we saw strong conversions because, like, it was very compelling to have that be broken. So I think that is informing a little bit of, like, how we approach the end of episodes and cliffhangers. Like, I think that, like, like, thumbnail wise, we learned that, like, more naturalistic thumbnails worked really well, which hasn't always been what we've done. And so, like, that's something that I think is a takeaway from this. I think that, like, I agree with Sam that, like, a lot of this was applying, we got the mix of, like, I am very proud of this season overall, and that, like, I do think it was the best mix of the different elements that, like, we've been able to put together. Like, I think one takeaway for me was, like, I feel like this was the time where we put the most effort into really showing cool locations. And I think it really did pay off in a way that it never fully has in other seasons. Like, we really did go to some really cool spots and, like, put some real effort into filming those spots well. And, like, I think it paid dividends in a way that we haven't totally seen in the past. So, like, that's something that I'm a little more focused on going forward, is, like, I think I am a little more hot on, when possible, having seasons show off locations. And then I guess the final thing, which, maybe this sounds stupid, but, like, I think that it enforced just how closely a lot of people are paying attention to the decisions that we're making if you give them the tools to understand those decisions. Like, and I think it also highlighted the importance of giving them, as the audience, as much context as possible.
I have another thing we learned.
We lost
Adam.
Uh-oh.
We've lost him. Here's
what
Adam,
we also learned.
we learned that Adam is funny when he's muted.
His mouth is moving, but he's muted. Like, your mute button is on.
I assume. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
But now it's coming through my AirPods. Terrible audio
That's all right.
quality.
Okay, relevant. Here's what we learned this season. We needed to sort out our mics. We broke, I think, like 5 mic sets maybe.
Yep.
This season.
Yeah, we broke more than ever before. I had to go to like a Japanese electronics store in Utsunomiya. It was terrifying.
I went to one in Tokyo on my way to Narita Airport. It was carnage. However,
stuff.
you will be happy. I can already say the reason why we've learned this. Here's a little spoiler for season 13. Ben and did you break any mics?
We broke no mics.
We broke no mics.
We broke no mics on our side
As
either.
far as we know, we have not yet found any missing audio clips in the next season.
There's one on our side, but zero mic breakage season. This is going to do wonders for our bottom line.
I know. Anyway, sorry.
How did you learn how to not break mics? Just to
we have different mics now that are a little less breakable, I think is part of it.
Yeah.
better equipment, same behavior.
Yeah. DJI released these new minis that are pretty good.
Yeah.
But anyway, to finish what I was saying, I think that like it was a reinforced to me, like if you give the audience the tools to understand decisions, like how closely they are paying attention, like, which I think that sometimes, especially like in past seasons, like in tags and stuff, the audience has such a limited ability to understand all of the choices that you could potentially be making about what routes to take, that it can be easy to be like, well, the audience just isn't that paying that close of attention to our decisions. They're in it more for the feelings and the excitement and the, when we present them a scenario, then it's easier to follow. But I think this season with the cards, it was a little bit like, oh man, like if you give them the tools to really follow what's going on, they are laser focused and really following and really thinking hard about the choices that are made. And then also I think it gives reason to be like, we need to make sure we're giving them full context for why we're making decisions. Because I think sometimes in the edit, there's so much decision making we have to cut out in the edit. But I think that this raised my bar a little bit for the amount of decision making that the audience wants sometimes, because like there is stuff where it's like for example, with my first run with the vetoes, it's like we hadn't fully explained how vetoes worked. We hadn't explained that you can re-ask a question for double the cost if it's vetoed, and we hadn't explained, like, and then I think the other thing being like, I think that many of the questions that are vetoed, like there are other questions that just get you the exact same thing, but I didn't like fully walk through that. And then I think people like, there were so many people who were like, I was going insane about why they didn't use the vetoes. And I think it's like, well, for us, like once the audience learned in episode 3 or 4, like, oh, if you veto a question, you can re-ask it for double the cost. They were like, it was this interesting thing where everybody was so upset we didn't use the vetoes, and then they learned how the vetoes work, and then everybody was like, this is stupid how the vetoes work. They're useless. And I made the point in the layover. I was like, so everybody was upset that I didn't use the vetoes because they're so powerful. Now everyone's upset because they say the vetoes are useless. Has anyone made the connection that means that they shouldn't have been mad at me? If everyone's upset that the vetoes are useless, then that means they weren't super powerful when I didn't use them. Anyway, this is again.
I think ironically, like if information had been introduced in reverse order,
if we had just given them all the information early on, instead of the audience being understandably, like I'm not blaming them, I'm blaming us. Understandably annoyed that I didn't use the vetoes, and then annoyed when they learned how they really worked. If we had just explained it in the first place, they wouldn't have experienced either of those feelings of annoyance, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's a reminder to us of like, it's really important to give the audience as much context as we possibly can for how the game works. And obviously that really has to be balanced with pacing and stuff, because we have to be careful about not over explaining, especially early on. But like, I think that was something I learned, was like, I think I had been potentially underestimating the audience's capacity for how closely they can follow strategy if you give them the tools, and also how frustrating it is for them if you haven't given them those tools. Does that seem fair, guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a balance of, you know, there's the you always, I think, in video production have to remind yourself that you hear from the most engaged 10% of the audience, but there's 90% of the other people that you don't hear from. And of course you want to you want to reward the people that are most engaged, but you also want to make something accessible for pragmatically. I mean, you as video producers, you want to make the content accessible for a wider audience. So it's always a balance. But I agree that I always love deep strategy. I mean, I think that's, there are a lot of shows where you can watch someone in Japan. There's not many shows where you can watch someone play hide and seek across Japan. So our differentiating factor is deep, interesting strategy. So I think the more we can elevate that and the more we can make it accessible for the audience to engage with that, the better.
Yeah. All right. Any hints, any sneak previews you want to give for next season? Tom Scott
Huge.
joined you.
What are we allowed to say, Sam?
Very competitive.
Very cool. It's so funny watching the footage. We've been editing this show. That man is locked in. I have never seen a competitor more locked in.
Yeah.
It is very fun. It's gonna be a good one.
Yeah.
Has it been like in
Definitely
the works
one of
for a
this-
while to get him on?
Honestly,
Maybe it just work out.
we can say this. So we were sitting in Ben's apartment, literally right behind where you can see him right now, back in November?
Something like that.
And we were discussing, we're pretty much locked in on the format that this season will be. And we started discussing guests, and we were like, Tom's expressed interest in the past. Should we see if he's maybe interested, available, just float it? So I texted him. And he was like, he pretty immediately texted back like, yes. And he was like, he made it clear that it was like not 100% commitment, yes, but like I totally want to do this. And then we got on a call like 5 minutes later, and within 30 minutes of floating the idea of Tom Scott coming on the season, we had him like 90% committed. He was very excited.
To add color to the story, like we were like talking about guests, and we talked about Tom, and we were like, well, can anyone think of a guest who would be better than Tom, especially for this season? And we were like, well, no, like it's really hard to imagine who could beat Tom. And we were talking about like, well, who would our second choice be? Who would our third choice be? And we were like, well, before we even try to figure out what our second and third choice is, like we could just ask him. And again, we thought it would be like a matter of days or weeks to get this sorted out. And the fact that we got him immediately, like, was pretty hype for us.
It was like the fastest we locked in a guest, besides maybe Toby the second time.
Toby the second time, it was
seconds.
literally, she was literally just responded like, yes. Like that. It's great that we have these guests. I mean, I know that like for especially like Toby, I mean, all of our guests I think watch and appreciate the show, but like I think both Toby and Tom, they're like properly, like they're not only watching, they're watching when the episodes come out, and like they're the kinds of people that like they are truly engaging and analyzing decisions. So I know that for them, and Tom kind of expressed this to me, like for him, it was like, oh yeah, I'm going on one of my favorite shows. So of course he came in with a lot of thoughts, a lot of opinions, deep strategy. I know that, he expressed to me that like he sort of understands now better some of the decision making and stuff, and ways in which we play, actually experiencing it. And one thing that he said to me was like, oh yeah, now I understand why you're not running at every moment, because it's a 12-hour, it's a long day, or not always 12 hours, but
It feels like later era Survivor, where like now the people who are coming on
Yeah.
the show are like people who watch the show and they have all of these like insights from watching the show and
Right.
like want to do.
Mhm.
It's very interesting.
Well, especially
It's
jumping
new.
in, you guys have played 12 seasons of, different kinds of these games. So like you kind of have to bring on somebody who's going to be at least somewhat up to
Right.
speed, right?
Yeah.
I think ideally,
Yeah. But the game is also, I think, a lot of fun. It was no,
What
I'm
can you
thinking
say?
about
Can we
spoilers.
reveal? Could we reveal something?
Ooh.
I don't know.
No.
We don't edit this podcast, so anything we say, we're committed.
We can edit
Yeah,
whatever you
here's-
want.
Yeah, you
here's-
just tell us. what
Can
you
we
want.
can we say this? Can we say that I think that there were things that happened in the playing of the game that had never happened in simulation, and that
Yeah.
were exciting. That like there were things that happened that we had simulated this many times, and stuff like that had never happened. And then when we actually
Yeah.
played it, stuff happened that had never even happened in simulation. That was kind of cool. That's a good teaser.
Agreed. And I think we all agreed at the end of the season that like how the season actually played out, like if you imagine like infinite versions of playing a season of the format that we did and how entertaining that would be on average, this is definitely above that average.
It's like the
we
Doctor
were-
Strange, like one reality.
Why was I thinking exactly that? I literally was like, oh, so no Doctor Strange. Got it.
Yeah, but anyway, we're I'm eagerly awaiting. I think actually sometime today I get to watch the first
Yeah.
export of episode 1 from
Part
from
of the first
the
export.
editing team. So I'm looking forward to that. But
This podcast took a while. Might be tomorrow now.
oh,
Now you blaming us.
All right,
gonna
well,
delay our entire
All right,
season.
get off the podcast. Get to work right now.
time for you guys to go.
All right, you
is-
here, audience. Go blame Rob Has a Podcast for the season being out later.
Do
Um,
it.
no, it's not your fault.
anything to plug before you you head out here?
We have a new
Abolish.
Nebula original coming out soon.
Abolish
Oh
everything.
yeah. Abolish everything.
Mhm. It's very different. It's not
Very
necessarily like designed for the jet lag audience, but I think the jet lag audience will very much like it because I mean you'll see Ben and Adam will be on the first one of the they'll each be on
first two
one of the first 2 episodes.
Yeah.
It's a comedy show.
Ooh.
It's very good.
It's
Produced
a
by
little bit
Amy.
like
Amy's
panel
the
show.
showrunner.
Am I right?
It's a New York comedy show. Yeah, it's kind of like a panel show, and
Yeah.
we're filming it live.
Very cool.
I don't think we've
Final
announced a
thing
release
I
date,
want to say.
but it's coming out before the next jet lag season, the first episodes at least.
That's true. My final statement of the podcast is that I know that everyone's going to be like, they went on the podcast and all they did was try to defend their decisions. And I want to say that
Are you defending this decision?
No. I want to say, just to be clear, because I think we said it many times, I just want to underscore it. We, and by we, I mean me and Sam mostly, not Ben, made several poor strategic decisions. 100% made many bad strategic calls, could have done better. No argument at all on that. That's my
Meanwhile,
final
Good.
Sam's
Good.
been newly-
Shame has properly been placed.
Sam was like, why am
I
I?
don't know, sounds like Adam
You
speaking
know
for me.
I am.
Just play.
No, I think I played
me.
everything perfectly. I have zero regrets. Can't imagine how I could possibly play any better. And any lack of winning, not my fault. It's anyone and anything but my fault. That's my concluding word.
Honestly, period. And that's the energy we need for 2025.
That's a joke. I played terribly. Goodbye.
No, Sam.
Just take that. Just take that one clip. That's all we need.
Please,
Yeah,
clip it.
there's your
We edit
promo
this
clip.
podcast.
That's how you get the jet lag audience in. Some hate
Yeah.
clicks. As
Yeah.
I endorse that. I think you should
Headline:
do that.
Sam takes no responsibility. Audience is wrong for
Yep.
criticizing his gameplay.
100%. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank
All
you
right.
guys so much for
Thanks,
joining us.
y'all.
This is very fun as always.
Yeah, this was truly the best.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
We'll of course be back to cover next season. Excited to watch the one reality that Doctor Strange has picked out for Jet Lag season 13 and definitely wasn't scripted. And we'll have some fun and hopefully chat with these guys once again. So thank you again for joining us. Make sure you check out all the other coverage we do here at RHAP. We've got scripted shows. We've got shows that cover scripted shows. I've got a Big Brother off-season podcast that's going on. Sasha, got a couple things.
I'll be there today.
Yes,
Well,
she will be there today.
Recording.
All right. So that's what we got. Thank you so much. We will see all of you next time.